So hi there and welcome to this episode of UK Edu Stories. Not had an episode for a little while with the Easter break and all of that, but I'm really excited to start the show back up again now as we're entering the summer term. And I'm pleased that a few things have changed since our last episode as well. I've been able to have a haircut and the weather's gotten a bit nicer. So fantastic to be coming back on and having the show running again. And looking forward to welcoming Bookie and Zena back onto the show with me hosting in a very near future too. So this evening's episode, it's a topic that's really interesting to me because, if you know about my work and what I've been doing over the years, I used to teach and now do a whole variety of different things. And if you haven't heard, I now work part-time as well with Net Support. I took a role there in January as the head of education there, alongside my substantive work working with schools, training, and all the other bits and bobs that I do, speaking at conferences and all this sort of stuff. But it's been a really interesting transition moving out of the classroom and out of the leadership roles into the work that I do now. Like many, I fell into it. I didn't plan to leave the classroom and those sorts of things. I think that's often the best way. But what I was really interested in hearing from were some people who've been there, done that, got the T-shirt sort of thing. Because I think the pandemic, whilst it's been a really difficult time for all of us, it has brought about lots and lots of different opportunities. And so the show this evening, we have two guests on this evening. We have Kat Couchy. I won't introduce the two guests too much. I'll let them talk about what it is that they do and all these different things. But we have Kat Couchy and Vanessa Leach joining me, both former teachers now working in roles in businesses that support education with educational technology. So I'm really excited to hear from both Kat and Vanessa. But as always on UK Edu Stories, we're very keen to have some audience engagement. So please do say hello in the chat. It's nice to know that I'm not sort of talking to myself and all those things. And so with that in mind, thank you very much to Sarah. Welcome to the show this evening, Sarah. I hope you're doing well. And thank you for joining us this evening. So without any further ado, let me bring the guests on and give them an opportunity to talk about who they are, what they do, and those sorts of things. And also welcome to Bookie. Thank you for joining us, Bookie. I know you've got another engagement this evening, so good luck with that as well. But thank you for joining us and look forward to you joining me co-hosting in the very near future too. So first up, we have Kat Couchy. Welcome to the show, Kat. Let's just make it a bit more equal in terms of the size. Welcome, Kat. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. And thank you, Vanessa, as well. Welcome, both of you. So thank you for giving the time up this evening to come and share about your journey and your experiences and all those sorts of things. I'm going to start with you for a second, Kat. Could you just explain who you are and what it is that you do now?
Yep, so I'm Kat. I'm the product manager of Rudy School from Net Support. So I work with Mark, which is a privilege and also not always a privilege, but no, it's great working with Mark. Before that, I was a primary school teacher and then I've transitioned into this role. I'm also a member of the Global Equality Collective and a GIST role model for Tone Camps.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing about that. And thank you for the lovely compliment there. Thank you very much. Love working with you too. Thank you. Over to you, Vanessa. Can you share a little about your history and journey into the role and the work that you do now, please?
Yeah, I'll start with a compliment too. The hair looks good, Mark. Nice haircut.
Thank you.
So I work for Tute. What we do is simple. We have a team of qualified teachers who deliver live online lessons to fill gaps in the education of children and young people. So you can imagine we're really busy at the moment. I'm managing director at Tute, so I've got overall responsibility for the company's performance, financial and quality perspective, of course, for the staff, for their output and their well-being, and ultimately for the outcomes of our students. I've been there now since 2013. I've been through a lot of ups and downs there, but I absolutely love it. I'm so lucky to work with an incredible team of people, the majority of whom are former teachers, but then people from other industries as well and other businesses before
that. It's a great business. I mean, I first met you at the Tute offices up in Wrexham some time ago. In fact, there's a link actually with Net Support there actually, because I was up there doing one of our EdTech Roundtable discussions, filming over in Harden. not too far from where you were based. So that was the first time we met, and I was really impressed by the sort of the pedagogy and the thinking behind everything that I saw at the business. Tell me, you came from teaching. Well, what was your role formerly before you left and started doing what you're doing now?
So before TUT, I was a secondary school teacher. I was a languages teacher, started off as a French teacher, went on maternity leave as soon as I started, pretty much, and then came back as head of the Welsh department in my NQT year. And of course, you know, Welsh was my first language, as you can hear from my accent. So I was really passionate, and I worked in a successful, happy school, and I had a real passion for teaching and learning and how kind of the mechanics of teaching works. And what really does work in a classroom. So I was really passionate about pedagogy straight from the off, really. I loved sort of creating resources and just making learning really engaging for children. And then when I was in school, I did a lot of other stuff as well that I really liked. So I worked with WJC, providing CPD for teachers, worked with Microsoft, BBC Bitesize, just creating resources. And I loved the thought of what I was creating was not just in my classroom, but it was working for other children as well, and helping other teachers, because we all know the best CPD is when you share resources with other teachers and share best practice. So I used to love doing that. Yeah, I just loved doing the other things that wasn't just in the classroom, you know, things that I knew were helping others within education.
So that what prompted you to start exploring alternative routes then? So clearly you love teaching and learning, you love working in schools, all of that. Or was it this sort of this outward sharing that prompted you then to leave teaching and start working in industry?
No, not at all. I thought I'd be in teaching forever. I thought I'd be in teaching, you know, till I was 65 or 70 or whatever, until I was getting my pension. It hadn't occurred to me that I would leave. But I was approached by the founder of TUT and then CEO to try to develop a Welsh medium side of TUT. And again, Welsh being a passion of mine. I was instantly pulled in, and I thought, oh, this will be a little bit like my WJC work, where I can do a little bit on the side, if you like. So I was instantly interested. And at the time, I'd not long finished my second maternity leave. And to be honest with you, I was probably getting a bit bored in the classroom. I had no desire to sort of go into senior leadership. I think I had no confidence, I suppose, to do that. And I had a young family, so there's no real desire there. The school wasn't great at the time with professional development, so I didn't have much of that. But even despite all of that, I still thought absolutely no chance am I leaving the classroom. I came into teaching to make a difference. And that's, you know, I can only make a difference in my classroom. So it just didn't occur to me. But in the end, having thought about it, and my husband really pushed me. And I realised I could make more of a difference at TUT, because EdTech, you know, can just facilitate so many opportunities for children. I thought, well, maybe I can make more of a difference there. And that was genuinely the reason why I went. I was very lucky to have been given a sabbatical from school, so it wasn't a huge risk. So I thought, if I ask for a sabbatical, I can always go back.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then I dipped my toe into the private sector.
That sounds very similar to my sort of route, really, because again, I never planned to leave the classroom either. I sort of fell into what I do, from like you're saying, sharing, putting things on my blog, writing, making resources, helping others, organising teach meets, all these different things. But the activities I was doing sort of led me down a similar path to yourself, really. There, that's really, really interesting. Thank you so much for that. I want to come to some questions for you now, Kat, if I can, please. Thank you again to you for joining us this evening. Could you talk about the responsibilities, first of all, that you have in your current role as product manager at Really School? Is that okay? What sort of things do you do?
So as product manager, I'm responsible for the product as a whole. So it's really important for me to make sure that everything is high quality, and not only to communicate between different teams at work, but also with all of the schools and educators that we work with. I'm really passionate that we are very kind of educator driven, and that all our development is geared towards what they need, tailoring the product and making improvements to help meet their new challenges. As we know, teaching always is facing new challenges, especially over the last year. So it's really important for me to still be really involved in education so we can best support people with it.
So what role did you have previously in your primary school, Kat?
I was
do you think it prepared you for what you do now?
So I was a year 2 teacher, and I really enjoyed teaching as well. I knew for a long time I wanted to work in education. I just wasn't 100% sure how I wanted to do it. I went to university and did a degree in drama, so I just really loved the arts, and I enjoyed being able to do kind of really creative aspects of the job when I was teaching. And then I found that has kind of really filtered into my job now, because I really enjoy all that design work and like coming up with different ideas for the product and working on bits of marketing. So all that kind of creative stuff is like feeding in. But one of the main reasons why this was a really good fit for me was the school I worked in was actually collaborating with Net Support in the initial development of Really School. And
Right.
as I was looking for a different challenge outside of the classroom, this was just perfect for me, because I loved the school that I worked in. I had a very close relationship with everyone there. I also really wanted to take on the challenge of something that could support the educators. So all the people I worked with at that school and other schools all across, the UK and eventually beyond. So I just wanted to be able to, kind of move into a different role where I supported teachers rather than students.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing that, Kat. And again, it's lovely to hear that it was just it's like a natural progression, really, wasn't it? As you see, it wasn't you didn't like teaching or you didn't want to get it. You just see that natural progression and that the opportunity sort of presented itself, a bit like what we heard with Vanessa sharing there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Vanessa shared about what Tute is. What is Really School for those who don't know?
So Really School is a solution for primary schools and earlier settings. So it's for the kind of daily tasks that a lot of teachers will have, like recording observations, making assessments, linking learning assessments together, evidencing all your judgments, also things like communicating with parents, supporting home learning. So it's kind of a solution with lots of different strands to help reduce workload and save time, which is something that as a former teacher I know is really important. And I think it's just something EdTech should always be doing, is helping to save time and reduce workload. That should be like a big checkbox for anything that teachers are using. So when I saw Really School, I knew it was something that I really wanted to get involved with, because it really fitted very nicely into classroom life and just made things quicker and easier and simpler. And I knew it would have really good value for the staff and therefore the pupils, because they've got more time to spend on teaching and planning and less on, paperwork and everything else.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. I've just going to do a bit of a shout out now to some of our audience as well. So Bookie's already said hello. We've got Al, a friend of all of ours, Kingsley, joining us, saying looking forward to another great show. Hi, Al. Welcome. And Al does say he's 100% biased, but he thinks you're a superstar. So that's lovely. Thanks for the endorsement there. Welcome to Zena joining us as well. Looking forward to co-hosting with you again soon too, Zena. Thanks for joining us. Lovely comment from Bookie as well. Great to hear Kat make it clear that she wanted to be in a role where she still supported education and supporting teachers. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've got more comments, please do add them into the chat. I'd be very happy to share them. And if you've got any questions for our guests this evening as well, please do pop them in and I'll be happy to bring those to our guests as well. Jumping back to you now for a second, Vanessa. Say, your role now as managing director, you haven't had that role all the way through in your journey at Tute, but your role does differ quite a lot from Kat's role. How does it how do your responsibilities now sort of differ, or are there similarities really to what you were doing when you were in school way back when, sort of eight years ago? You said you left.
Yes. So the first thing, Mark, there's no bell, which was quite difficult to get used to in the beginning, that there was no bell during the day, and adapting to the office actually was quite difficult to begin with. It's a completely different role, but the core reason as to why I'm doing what I'm doing is the same, and it's making a difference to students. So I feel really privileged to be in a position where I almost get the best of both worlds. So I get to do all of these different things, transferring the skills that I learned in the classroom, because as a teacher, you have so many skills that I don't think we realize that we have. We're not just teaching children, there's lots of other things as well. So it's great to be able to do that as well as stay in education. So firstly, I was head of teaching and learning. So that meant leading our fantastic team of teachers, some of them, Mark. And we established an online pedagogy. So when we started, now if we were starting an online learning teaching company now, there'd be loads of places we could go to get some information, wouldn't there, and to steal some ideas. There was nothing at that time. So I brought with me my Estin sheet that told me what an outstanding lesson was. And I broke that down and started working that into our pedagogy. And of course, alongside that, there's a commercial element to business as well. And I had no idea of some of the terms let alone being able to put lots of those things into practice. But I was really keen to learn. And I loved it when I did. And I was part of lots of different parts of the company, not just the teaching and learning and establishing that pedagogy, but because we were a small business, you have to roll your sleeves up and get involved. So I was involved in sales, marketing, operations heavily as well. So coming back to that commercial element, what I had to do as well with the pedagogy was make that scalable so that we could work as a business and build as a business. And we've been able to do that. And as I say, we have a fantastic team of teachers who have refined that pedagogy over time. So now we've got to a point where we can scale that pedagogy, which we are doing at the moment under the National Tutoring Programme. So we've grown probably by about 110% in the past year, which has been a challenge. But because I was involved in all these business parts of the business, I was made a director, I think in 2017, which came with different responsibilities, more kind of legal responsibilities, which was, a lot to take on. But again, I loved it. And then in 2018, I was appointed managing director, which I think was the right decision, not necessarily me in that role, but more having a teacher in that role, because I think having a former teacher leading a teaching and an education business is the right thing to do, because what we're able to do now is really put the students at the core of everything that we do. And that's still true for me now. And I feel privileged to still be able to do that whilst working in industry. And, I really love the fact that we can make a difference to disadvantaged children, because I was one of those ones. So that passion's still in me and I'm still able to do that. And then being in the leadership role as well, it gives me the opportunity to make decisions I like doing, to take action on things. But again, having a team that shares the vision of the students, it's just fantastic. I'm really lucky. I'm gushing here, aren't I? I'm really lucky to do what I do. It was definitely the right decision.
Well, that leads me on to my next question. This is a question for both of you, actually. I did share the questions with you both beforehand, so you know what's coming. But would you, either of you, sort of go back to the classroom? Would you stop doing what you're doing now and go back to teaching in the classroom, or would you stay with doing what you're doing now? Kat, I'll ask you first. Would you go back to teaching?
No, I wouldn't. Although I really enjoyed it. I absolutely love what I'm doing now for Really School and being part of Net Support. Net Support as a company have such a wonderful ethos, and they're really rooted in education. And I love that so many people that work there have other roles in education as well. So that, bit like Vanessa was saying, that pedagogy is really there. And I just love the diversity of the role. Every day is different. I like being able to support lots of different educators and do different things all the time. I like that I also have some flexibility, that I have time for things like, I said before, I was a member of the Global Quality Collective, so I like being able to have time for passion projects as well, and being somewhere that's really actually supportive of things like that is really important to me as well.
No, I'm not going to deny any of that sort of stuff. That's fantastic. Thank you. How about yourself, Vanessa? Would you go back to the classroom or to a leadership role, perhaps?
No, just as Kat, I love what I do too much now to go back. That's not to say I don't miss it, though. One of the most difficult things for me to adjust to was not being a teacher anymore. I missed the title, owning the title of being a teacher, because I was so proud of it. And it took a long time. I think probably only the past couple of years, when somebody asked me what I did, I was always a teacher. And now I think, it's been too long since I left the classroom to be able now to say I'm a teacher. But I miss that, and I'm envious of my friends who, of course, still have lots of friends in teaching, because they have that direct impact, that face-to-face. My friend is an assistant head teacher. She's full of stories of, breaking up this fight today and getting through to this child and speaking to this parent. And I do miss that part of it, because it just felt like it almost, when you leave, well, certainly for me, it didn't feel like I had a real job for a bit. So I missed that, and I'd probably be rubbish now anyway. Lots changed in 8 years, so I'm not sure how I'd be in front of a classroom. But I'm happy with what I do now. So the answer is no.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Sorry, Kat.
Oh no, I was just to say, I get what you mean about missing it, because I do miss some of those moments, like when you see when they finally get it, or when you've really made a difference and you've really seen certain people's grow over the year. And I do miss those aspects of it, definitely.
Yeah.
Those were really special and rewarding parts of it.
And some of our teachers all of our teachers still have that. So I'm envious a little of the teachers in our organisation as well, because they still have that on a daily basis. They get through, the students make progress. And I think in any in school, even when you remove yourself ever so slightly from that, don't you, as you get into leadership, I suppose. So yeah, I miss it.
So you don't ever jump in and do a cover lesson or anything then, Vanessa? You don't jump in and take over if somebody's off sick or anything then?
Not if I can help it. No, we have a big team now, so there's always somebody else there. I used to, and I almost had to a couple of weeks ago to do a Welsh lesson, but thankfully I didn't in the end. Again, I think I'd be rubbish now.
Yeah, I found it strange. I went back to do some training for some different bits of EdTech stuff actually for some pupils, and it was really nice but also really weird at the same time because I made me realise how long it had been since I'd actually spoken in front of a group of children. So yeah, it was very surreal.
No, I can equate with both what you're saying there. With the work I do now, I sometimes when I'm doing work with schools, I might sort of teach a model lesson, and I'm confronted with 30 year one children. I'm a secondary teacher by trade as well, so that's pretty much outside my comfort zone as well. But it is a great leveler. It's interesting what you were saying, Vanessa, about the impact, because one of the things that I miss is, and I didn't realise that I'd miss it until quite a few years into doing what I do now, and I love that global impact. The fact that a school in New York is using one of my resources, or I get the feedback from somebody in Australia, or what have you. But I miss the community impact. When you work in a school for a period of time, you get into the families, you become a sort of regular face. You get the "Oi, sir" sort of stuff across the Tesco car park, and all this sort of thing, don't you? When you're in catchment, but you don't have that when you leave and work in industry. But like you say, that impact you can have. I think it's something that's sort of common between the three of us, actually, sort of driving us with the work that we do now. So yeah, I can definitely sort of equate with the comments and things that you've shared there. Thank you to our audience as well, having a lovely little conversation between themselves. Sarah and Bookie and Zena are catching up with themselves. I'll leave you to your conversation. But remember, if you do have any questions for our guests, please do drop them into the chat. I'm sure they'll be very happy to take any of your questions. A question for both of you again. One of the reasons often cited by teachers looking to leave the classroom is to improve work-life balance. Have you found that to be the case in your experience? And I'll ask you, Vanessa, first. Have you noticed sort of an improvement in work-life balance having left the classroom?
Well, I think balance is difficult. When you love what you do and you have a team to support and you have a family to manage and a home to run, finding the balance is always difficult. And I don't work less now than I used to. I often do 60-hour weeks. It's just a given. But that doesn't mean that I don't find a work-life balance either, because the flexibility that I have now is just so different from what I had in school. Yes, I work 60-hour weeks, but I can do my shop. I can go to Aldi. I can drop my kids off at school. I can even go away, take a Friday off and go away at a weekend. Things that you don't have. And I think for me, work-life balance isn't just about the hours that you work. It's about the quality of life that you get as well. So in that way, definitely there is more of a balance because I have such flexibility. And we try to ensure that that's the same for the rest of the team too. It's a bit more difficult with our teachers because they have to be in front of the class. And I think that's something different that I found as well. My job is, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of responsibility. They say it can be lonely sometimes, but I've got a great team where I can talk about things. And Mark, you've been there for me a few times when that's not been possible with the team. But my work is different from a teacher in that if a teacher has a lesson at 9 o'clock, they have to be prepped for that lesson. There's no umming or ahhing, they have to be prepped for it. And that's a different type of pressure to me having a meeting at 9 o'clock, which may be important, but I can maybe wing that a little, or I can change and move the deadline if there's something else that's there. So that kind of pressure is different from what I had in the classroom. But for our teachers in TUTE, I think their work-life balance is very different. One of our teachers did a video for us actually a few weeks ago saying that the work-life balance he's found has been immense and it's been fantastic for his family. So that there's a lot of flexibility. Whether the balance is right, I don't know, but certainly flexibility.
That's a great response, and Brookie has actually highlighted one of the things I was going to sort of mention, and she's put that into the chat, and she picked up on what you'd said about the quality of life that you have. Yeah, I think we all work really, really hard, don't we? But it is those freedoms that working outside of the classroom actually brings you, that flexibility to take a Friday off, like you say. What are your experiences like, Kat?
I would echo what Vanessa said about the flexibility. So it's not necessarily about working less, but it's having those opportunities, like Vanessa said, to be able to kind of move things around and make it work for you. I think with this role, I do find it easier as well to be able to kind of cut myself off and say, right, it's time to stop now. Whereas I know I was teaching, just felt like you couldn't really do that because I'd always have that kind of guilt of, but then will the lesson be good enough? Will the pupils learn enough? And because I was so focused on them and wanting to do the best for them all the time, it was very difficult to switch off. And obviously what I do now is important. It's not to say it's not, it's just when you've got like little people who you know you're making a massive impact on day to day, that pressure is always there. You want to do your best for them. So I think that definitely impacted on the work-life balance as well. So yeah, it's definitely easier, I think, to find time in different ways, in different places. I mean, I couldn't, for example, pop to the pharmacy quickly during the day while I was teaching, or like Vanessa said, take an afternoon off or anything like that. So you can kind of get your time back as and when you need it. So I think that's the key thing. It's more flexible.
Kat mentions the pharmacy because I got caught out. Was it yesterday or the day before? I popped to the pharmacy during the work day, and I was in a meeting.
It's true that you can do that.
It's true, you're exactly right. You can absolutely do those things.
Maybe not at the same time as the meeting, though. Maybe.
Exactly. We've got a question from Sarah Hazel. I'll just move things around a little bit here. Here we go. A question from Sarah Hazel. And this goes to something that we were talking a little bit about before we went live today, actually. But do you think that more teachers will make the move out of the classroom into other educational sectors, particularly following COVID, into things like EdTech solutions? What are your thoughts on that, Kat?
I think it would be easier for them to make the move at the moment because I think kind of, as I think it might have been before we started chatting, Vanessa alluded to before, that there's a lot more kind of options out there now since COVID. So a lot more kind of EdTech things have started up. We're seeing a lot more educators becoming edupreneurs who are noticing, gaps and being able to take that time to create new things. So I think it'll be easier. And then I think you will have some people moving because of the additional pressures of the last year and continuously, because it's a totally different environment, especially for people that have just started teaching, that don't really know what to expect from it, and they've kind of been thrown into this difficult environment. So you might see some more movement there as well, I think.
Yeah, no, I'd be minded to agree, and certainly, when we look at the financial side of things, the investment, it's such a huge growth market at the moment. Educational technology, there's something like 220 million investment, something in the last sort of few months into EdTech industries, just in the UK alone. So it's clearly a massive growth market, and I guess the pandemic will have had a big impact on that as well. What are your thoughts, Vanessa?
Yeah, well, just to add to that, they think that, well, there was a prediction that the EdTech industry would be worth 3.5 billion in the UK by this year, which is likely to be much higher now because of the pandemic. I think there's two things. Whether they leave because of it, I'm not sure, because about a third, I think, of teachers were leaving within their first 5 years anyway. So whether the pandemic adds to that or not, I don't know. And to echo what you said, Kat, and what we were saying earlier, COVID has been particularly hard on teachers. I think they've had to adapt so quickly and under such pressure. And outside of the NHS, I think it's probably been one of the professions that has suffered the most. It's been incredibly difficult. But then what I've also heard is I think the government have hit their targets for the first time this year with people coming into teaching, because of course it is a stable career. It is a pretty secure career compared to other things. And I think with COVID, there's been such instability in other industries. Maybe people see teaching as being one of those that's particularly stable, so might come into it. So there may be a bit of a balance there.
Yeah. It's definitely worth sort of thinking about. And it's interesting, I hadn't seen that statistic about them hitting the targets, because I mean, I know that we've been struggling as a nation. The UK has been struggling for some time to get the number of teachers into the profession. So, I mean, I think that's only for the good, really. do both, though, make a really compelling case for leaving teaching, given how much you love your current jobs, the fact you wouldn't want to go back to the classroom, all the rest of it. You make it sound like it's absolutely fantastic, but things aren't always as good as they seem, are they? And my next question sort of talks about the pitfalls. Surely there have been some pitfalls. There have been some, some things, some bumps along the road. Not every sort of surface is completely smooth. Jumping to you first, Vanessa, have you had any, if it's okay for you to share any of these, what sort of pitfalls or bumps in the road have you encountered along the way?
I think I was naive moving from the public sector to the private sector. It is different. People think differently and people expect different things. That commercial element certainly puts a different pressure. So I was naive, and it takes a while to get used to that. It does take a while to get used to, and it is not as secure as the public sector. Your pension's different. A lot of things like that are different, and adapting to that can take a while. And one of the things I've mentioned earlier, losing my teacher status, that's affected me a little bit because it was my identity. It's a vocation, so I found that difficult to adapt to. But also what we found challenging, and I know a lot of our teachers find this challenging, is we have responsibility to our students, but we don't have responsibility for them in a lot of ways. We don't make the decisions about their education. The schools really have the decision. The schools who use TUTS have the decision about the provision that they buy in for those children, whether it's appropriate for them, whether it's the best provision or not. We'll push back and we'll say, we don't think this is the right thing. But ultimately, it's not our decision. So having less direct, not impact, but direct decision making when it comes to the students that we teach was also difficult to adapt to.
No, that's really interesting, and certainly it is a business world, isn't it? And so that is, and it's like any industry, you have competitors, competition, and it can be really, really cutthroat out there, can't it? Kat, how about your experiences? Have you encountered any pitfalls along the way with your journey over to Really School?
The only kind of other thing I would add to some of the points that Vanessa made really is, perhaps she's found the same, is because women in tech are in the minority, that can be quite a challenge in itself as well. I think I didn't really realise when I first moved over just how outnumbered they were for women working in STEM in general, and that can be quite a challenge. And some of the kind of perceptions of women working in tech and kind of what roles they play wasn't so great either. So that's why I am glad that I'm with NetSupport, who are not like that at all. Been very supportive, and I was a bit worried when I first started actually that I didn't have that much experience within tech itself because I'd been a teacher, but I was able to learn everything on the job. But I do think there are kind of outside sources that do have those kind of perceptions of people, and people have assumed things like I'm someone's secretary or assistant or that kind of stuff. They don't think that I manage a product. There's like this automatic assumption, which is a bit upsetting at times, but I think that's the only thing I could really think of that's particularly been a challenge for me.
Well, just picking up on that, I remember being in our office and somebody was coming around with some flyers about something that the complex that our office is on. They were putting on some kind of event. And I answered the door and she gave me the flyer and she said, "Can you give this to one of the bosses? Can you give it to one of the directors?" And I said, "Well, I'll take it because I'm the managing director, so I can attend this." And that was from a woman, so I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just this sort of automatic, and it reminds me a lot of a session I joined recently, just lots of people talking about their jobs, and one of them was like a nuclear physicist, and she said the same thing, like everyone just thought she worked in the kitchen, I think was what they had, because she was in there once like making a cup of tea or something, and they all assumed that was her job and she was a catering, and she was just not that role at all. So yeah, I think that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes, but there are lots of really good places to get support and to network with other people in similar situations, which is really nice.
Since we're on the topic, Kat, can you share any places? I mean, it was when I was sort of formulating the idea for this episode, when I was talking with Bookie and Zena, I was really keen to make sure we had some strong female leads, because, as you say, it is a very male-dominated space. Even when we look at some of the the big three, Microsoft, Google, and Apple. We see, not that Anthony Salkito is a bad person per se, but it's Satya Nadella, all the rest of it is men at the top. So, what sort of support or recognition or movements are you aware of that might be of interest to women looking to sort of take the roles that you both of you move into? Have you got any recommendations?
Yeah, the first one I recommend is, so I'm part of the Women in STEM Network Techno Camps. So it's a group for anyone that works within science, technology, engineering, maths, any women that work within that, to network, kind of connect with each other, talk about roles. There's lots of different events, CPD, things like that. And then also the Global Equality Collective. There's lots of support and resources for kind of all kinds of diversity and inclusion, not just the gender gap, but lots of different things. And another good resource is That Works For Me. So a company that will help find really flexible working opportunities, which can be really great for women and men really that have got families or have, need more flexible work opportunities. They're really supportive of things like that as well.
That's great to hear. I like the work and the sort of the advocacy that Emma Turner has been sort of pushing for some time as well. More in actual education, but flexible working. Her book, Let's Talk About Flex, is really useful and gives lots of great ideas for how that sort of thing can work as well. Thanks for sharing. I've just popped the link to Techno Camps there into the ticker feed down the bottom there, and the name, the Global Equality Collective, so you can find those things just through searching those. Vanessa, did you have any links or contacts you could share on this sort of topic?
No, I don't actually. But what I would say is that the team you have around you, somebody's mentioned something about team in the chat, that is really, really important. We're a really good management team, and there's a senior leadership team of 3, and the 2 in the senior leadership team with me, Carol and Phil. I mean, I don't know what I would do without them. They prop me up, they listen, Carol in particular, because it is lonely, and you have to sometimes put a front on with a team because they look to you for positivity and for guidance and for leadership, but you have to have somebody who you can break down with and who you can just tear your hair out with, and who's just there for you as a support. So organizations, I'm not really aware. I know there's women in EdTech and those kind of things, but for me, it's more about having the other people around you on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah,
absolutely. Got some lovely comments from the audience this evening as well. Zena was sharing about work-life balance. She says it's taken her years to get to grips with this, and she reinforces what you said, Vanessa, about having a good team around you and how helpful that can be when you can support and help each other. Not in a negative way. I was recently kicked out of school by my head teacher. That was because it was time to go home, Zena. I think.
I had that with the caretaker. I used to get that with the caretaker sometimes. Be like, right, I'm locking the doors now. You have to get out. It's quite a good tactic to make you stop and go home.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Got another question from Sarah in the chat as well. Do you think the mainstream educational settings are supportive of alternative educational sectors and willing to embrace the alternative solutions they offer? I mean, I guess you'd be an advocate for that yourself, Vanessa, having been given the opportunity to start your journey now as part of a sabbatical.
Yeah. To answer the first part of Sarah's question, are they supportive? I think they are, and they're not. We've still got a long way to go. I think you'd agree with schools adopting EdTech. There's definitely some ways to go. Some schools fantastic, some schools not. But I suppose it also depends on the solution. If a solution works, whether it's EdTech or not, schools will embrace it. What I think schools might not do, particularly for what we do, is they don't welcome people back in as well as perhaps they should. So, we've got fantastic teachers who may well want to make the transition back into the classroom. And I know that a couple have tried, but it's really been a brick wall where they won't let them back in because they don't recognise that what we do is also a profession. I think there is somewhat of a mentality that if you're in education, you're in a school. And that's really where you should be. And outside of that, you don't really have the knowledge of education. You're not really a teacher. So I think that there's that element to it as well.
No, that is interesting. I have seen that and heard of stories like that myself. I do think there's a slight difference, though, between the independent sector and the public sector. I think the independent sector, because the schools are run so much more as businesses, and certainly we see that with Academy Change. We've seen some of the things coming out this week about how much some of the executives at the Harris schools earn. So clearly, lots of schools are run like businesses. But I think, speaking pretty generally, the independent sector tends to welcome teachers outside of who may have gone away and then come back in a bit more readily. What are your thoughts, Kat?
I think it depends on the school, really, and kind of how they view that support and whether they kind of see it as something that can, really help them and think something new for them to learn, new skills that people are bringing, or whether they see it as a challenge to what they do and they're kind of very traditional about it. So I think it's very school dependent. I think it depends a lot on kind of, whether the school is quite open to change or not. I would say that that's mainly what I would think for that.
Yeah, it's often down to the leader in that school as well, isn't it? And the attitude they have to EdTech. We've had schools that have used this for a long time, changed head teacher, and then don't use this again, and then the reverse as well. Head teachers have taken us with them to new schools.
And sometimes the reluctance, I think, to try things is just due to, being aware of staff well-being, worrying about training them on new things, or, that fear of the failure with it as well, because they're under a lot of pressure. So not all of it kind of comes from that refusing place, but some of it does. But there is just a lot of just feeling they don't have the time to explore options. What if it goes wrong? What if it doesn't work? When are we going to have the time to train people? And it, that can kind of really impact on their decisions as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What we try to take on, the way that we say it, is as much of the heavy lifting as we can. We make it as easy as possible, so that that using us is really, really easy. Because as you say, there's such pressure, so many other things to do, and often when we're commissioned by a school, it's up to a teacher in that school to make it work on top of everything else that they have to do. So it's important that we make it as easy as possible for them to use Tute.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant responses. Again, thank you both very much. And thank you to Sarah for the question. And we've talked about the gender issue a fair amount during the conversation this evening, but I have got a specific question on the topic. And I said we purposefully sought out two female leaders in the roles that you both have. And whilst we should probably be gender neutral, have you noticed any differences in the sorts of roles you are in for women compared to that of men? Do you find there's been a sort of disparity, for example, in pay? Is there a sort of gap in pay difference? Are those sort of things been issues for either of you?
It exists, definitely. Yeah, it does exist, definitely. It hasn't been a huge issue for me, to be honest, but there's two sides to it for me. The disparity. One is that there's no denying that being a woman often makes it tougher just because you're a woman, for many different reasons. I'd say I have had to work harder. I've had to prove myself more. It's been more challenging with the team. There is definitely that thing, if a man does something, he's confident. If a woman does it, she's bossy. So there's definitely that kind of stuff to have to push back against quite often. And then often we have families. I have a family. I am probably the main caregiver. So although my husband's great, but I am the main caregiver, and I want to be. So finding the balance again between both of those things are difficult. And often, not always, I understand, but often men don't have those same responsibilities. But also the other part of it is myself, lacking confidence, imposter syndrome, all those kind of things. So it's two-sided, and I've learned a lot, and I've grown in confidence a lot, again, due to an amazing team, building you up when you're feeling down and all those things. And I've worked on it as well. I have had to work on confidence. I still, I was nervous tonight talking. Why will anybody want to listen to what I've got to say? But we're working on it. But I think women tend to suffer a little bit more, don't they, from that imposter syndrome than men do.
Kat, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm someone that does suffer from imposter syndrome as well, and I'll do things like I'll apologize for something that I don't need to apologize for. Like, oh, sorry, I found this mistake. Well, I'm not sorry because I found it, and it's my job to spot it and give it back to you. But I kind of automatically go into that mode of not wanting to sound bossy or rude, or whereas I don't think often, not for all men obviously, but for some men, they just wouldn't even think of that. They'd be quite confident enough to just say, no, that's how it is. And I do think the element of that is, feeling like you have to work harder or fight more or prove yourself more. That definitely feeds into that imposter syndrome, and you get a bit of a cycle. But it is partly it is down to self-confidence and boosting yourself up. And also, as Vanessa talked about a lot, is the company that you're in, being in a company that supports you, whatever gender you are, whatever kind of background you have, whatever race you might be, whether you have disabilities, you want to be somewhere that is inclusive and that cares about all their employees and gives them the right support, then that makes a huge difference, thankfully. But you've got some places that aren't so much. So I'm glad we both don't work for places like that. So that does definitely make a big difference, is where you are and your team around you.
Yeah.
You're muted, Mark.
I spotted that. Thank you.
Classic.
I
have at least one meeting for someone every day, I think.
You didn't feel the need to say sorry for telling me, so that's a benefit. That's a bonus. But just want to reinforce that message again about where you work. I mean, obviously, Vanessa, you're the MD, but here's your MD or CEO, coming on to a show of an evening to support you, what you're doing as well. So, and I'd echo what Al says there too. We both think you're great in what you do, Kat. So, thank you both for that. I mean, it's as the male in the room, it is a difficult conversation for me, which is why I haven't really sort of commented on it and sort of left you both to say what you wanted to say around it. But thank you for being honest about your experiences and your perceptions and those sort of things as well.
I just have to say, sorry, Mark, just on that point, in my team as well, in the team, we do have amazing men as well who support me as the leader. There's 3 or 4 in our team, men, and they're fantastic. They don't expect anything different from me than I think they would from a male leader, and they do push and do give me confidence as well. So it's surrounding yourself with good people, be they men or women.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same as ours, and I think where we are, we're all allies for each other in whatever that personal challenge might be, or whatever might be going on. We're all each other's ally, and that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking personally, we've been able to have our relationship, Kat, working together. We're able to talk about the work stuff and all that, but we've got other things where we support each other as well. And I think that's a really nice that sort of hallmark where you can have those open conversations, but yes, provide professional challenge, be a critical friend, offer advice, support. You do the work and things as well, obviously. But it's done in a professional way, isn't it? And I think that's probably how it should be, really. We're getting towards the end of the show. I can't believe how quickly the time's flown today. You're both saying we should have 2 shows on this topic. Maybe we should come back and discuss things further. I want to ask, in a penultimate question, what other benefits that we haven't sort of mentioned so far, and what other benefits have arisen from the roles that you've taken on in the respective organisations? And I'll jump to you first for that, Kat, please.
What are the benefits? I'm trying to remember what I said already. So I think working like within, for example, Net Support, I mean, same with kind of lots of different companies, just the opportunity to learn a lot of different skills and kind of be able to not only move up but move across. And I found within a school it was difficult because unless I wanted to be a deputy head or a head teacher or such like, I didn't really feel like there were many other things that I could do. And I know it's not the same in every school. I know, for example, Emma's been doing lots of work on, with her staff, lots of different roles and exciting opportunities. I think that can be difficult in the classroom. Whereas within a company that kind of does lots of different solutions and has lots of different products, lots of different teams, it's easier to kind of move around and try out new things and grow and develop. So I would say that's a really key opportunity as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kat. And what about yourself, Vanessa? Any other benefits that you found?
Probably nothing more than I mentioned because I've said a lot, but definitely what you've said, Kat, is learning more. I've learned so much by being in business rather than being in school, and things that I'd never probably would have learned otherwise. And that's allowed me to develop in my confidence, professionally and personally as well. There's no chance I would have done this 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. So that's definitely been a benefit. And the fact that we can take action, there's much less restriction. Of course, in my role anyway, naturally, as MD, I can take more action, but there's much less restriction. If we want to do something, we can afford to do it. The people are behind, in on it. Then you can just take action on things. And with that, ultimately, you can reach more students than you probably could in your classroom, and teachers, if you're helping teachers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, look, we're getting to the very end of the show now. So I just want to, before we wrap up, say thank you to our audience for joining us and for the comments and the questions and so forth. And so this is your last opportunity. If you have any final sort of burning questions you'd like to ask Kath or Vanessa, then please do put those in the chat. But my final question for you both this evening is this. So finally, we often hear about teachers who are looking for alternative jobs outside of the classroom, but still want to engage in education-related activities. If somebody was looking to sort of move into a role similar to yours, maybe not going straight for MD or product manager straight away, perhaps, but if you are thinking of still having their foot in the door, as it were, sort of having an impact and helping children, improving lives, all those sorts of values that we've mentioned throughout the show, actually, what advice would you have for them if they're looking to move into this sort of industry? And since you're bigger on the screen at the moment, Vanessa, I'll ask you that first.
Well, I think firstly, recognise that talking to teachers, recognise that you do have lots of transferable skills, and there is a world out there beyond teaching. And that doesn't have to be a world outside of education. You can still be an educator and not be in the classroom. There's loads of transferable skills, fantastic communicators, presentation skills. And that's not just standing in front of a classroom, because I don't know about you, but presenting to children was very different from presenting to adults. But presentation and how something can be presented on a document, even, presenting information and making people see things differently. People skills, mediation, IT skills, creativity, mentoring. There's so many skills that teachers have. So I think first recognizing recognizing there is a world out there, and maybe it certainly helped me. It was doing things outside of teaching. So not taking the leap instantly, but doing little things outside of teaching first, things that interest you within education, and just see if there are other opportunities there. And then see how it goes from there. I'd say go for it. That would be my advice.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that advice and feedback there. Thank you very much. And then Kat, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, so I would say, obviously Vanessa mentioned like the transferable skills, but I think also additionally to that, have a look at the aspects of the job that you really enjoy, because both me and Vanessa identified there's a lot of things that we enjoyed about teaching that actually we've kind of brought with us into our job roles now. So I think that's really important. I'd also recommend, I came across a website recently called Did Teach, and it's all about lots of different career opportunities for people that used to teach. So a way that you can still use all those skills you've learned and kind of work within education or similar fields. So looking at places like that is a really good way to kind of get an idea of what's out there and what you might like. And yeah, look around, do lots of research, because actually there's so many opportunities that you don't realise are there until you start looking. It's not just kind of teaching or not teaching. There's so many options and so many ways you can still kind of have one foot in education, so to speak. So yeah, just don't be afraid to look around, and like Vanessa said, just go for it and try things, even if it's just like a voluntary basis at first, and then see how you go. But don't be afraid to try it.
No, absolutely not. And thank you for mentioning Did Teach as well. Previous guests on the Check It Out show that I do, which is actually, I'll do a shout out for it. Hopefully Bookie and Zena won't mind. Check It Out show once a month on a Tuesday, 7 till 9 p.m. The next Check It Out show is next Tuesday evening. Did Teach, a former guest on the Check It Out show. Bookie's joining us as well, but she's back again. So I've been royally caught out if I'm not allowed to mention. I'm sure she doesn't mind the Check It Out show, because actually Bookie is a guest on the next Check It Out show on Tuesday from 7 till 9 as well. So please do follow my Twitter account to join me for that episode next Tuesday as well. But listen, I'm going to bring you both back into the main screen just here. And thank you, Bookie. She says the Check It Out show is awesome. Thank you very much,
it is.
Bookie.
It is great.
Did Teach is a great resource. Find out more. I think it's didteach.com, but I'll tweet the link after the show, so you can look into that if that is of interest to you. Thank you. My final comments, really, I just say a huge thank you to both of you, Kat, and to you, Vanessa, for taking the time to come and join me and be brave. You know, you said, Vanessa, 6 years ago, you wouldn't have done this, and look at you now. No,
My mum will be proud.
Oh yeah.
She's tuning in right now.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I'll send it to them afterwards.
Yeah, that's what I thought I'd do as well. I'll let them know after.
See how it goes first.
I have to do this stuff now. Our like ever since I started Net Support kind of started pushing me into these things like, oh, you're good at talking to people, you should do these videos, or oh, you should do the training, or you should do the, and it's just all stuff I wouldn't have done before, but now I'm kind of making myself get more confident with it.
Yeah, I've definitely found that stepping out of the classroom has given me so much more confidence than I had before. Part of the sort of presenting work I started doing was because I went to a teach meet and presented to like 10 people, and it was like, put me in front of like 1,300 kids from year 7 to year 13 for an assembly, no problem. Put me in front of like 5 colleagues to show them how to do something completely. It's just completely different, isn't it? I've learned loads and loads from it as well. Got a lovely comment as well. Sarah, as obviously you all know, Vanessa, but Sarah is an employee of yours at Shoot, and she says, as one of Vanessa's employees, one thing to bear in mind in his alternative educational record is the enormous hard work and dedication which she has shown. So a lovely comment from your colleague there. And thank you, Sarah, for all of your support on UK Edu Stories as well. I know you enjoy the output that we have here, and it gives me certainly, and I'm sure with Zena and Bookie, lots of motivation to keep on going and doing the sharing that we do on these shows as well. So I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you, Kat, and thank you, Vanessa, for joining us. One final little shout out. I'm going to say, if you'd like to learn more about Vanessa's company, Tuut, then please do, and scrolling across the bottom there now, please visit tuut.com. As a national tutoring program partner, then you can use some of your funding to help get yourself some tutoring for your learners through Tuut. So please do check out their offer there. If you're interested in finding out more about Really School, then please do go to reallySchool.com. A fantastic solution. I mean, I'm kind of biased, but it's a fantastic solution for not only reducing workload, but for recording observations for early years and sort of key stage 1 primary settings. Reduce your workload. Lovely to have it all in one central place and space, but I'll let Kat tell you all about that when you get in touch with her following the show. So that's it from me. Thank you again, Kat. Thank you, Vanessa. Thanks to our audience, and look forward to seeing you for another episode of UK Edu Stories next Thursday from 7 p.m. as always. Take care, be safe, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Cheers then. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.